Welcome to sunny San Diego, and I am testing out the Hyundai Ioniq 5. Just got my first hands-on with the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and I'm really impressed. It looks awesome on the inside and the outside, and while personally I'm not throwing myself all over this car, you can see that it's been designed to be unique and has a lot of intention, which I really love. It's bold yet subdued and pretty futuristic inside and out. It's not hard to see why this car is turning so many heads this year. To top it off, the Ioniq 5 has a similar 800-volt architecture to the Porsche Taycan, so it can charge using super fast 350 kilowatt chargers. While there may not be many around yet, Hyundai says this does mean that the car could go from 10 to 80% in 18 minutes if you found the right charger. That's pretty amazing and likely fast enough for everyone. However, we'll still need to do some testing on our end to see how long it takes to actually charge it to full. No matter how long though, I'm still expecting it to be one of the faster EVs to top up throughout 2022. Moving over to the range side of things, the Ioniq 5 is rated for a maximum range of 488 kilometers, or 300 miles, and the base model starts at 354 kilometers, which is around 219 miles. All of these specs are really great for an EV that starts at $45,000 in Canada and even less in the US, and I'm thinking that this is definitely going to be a competitor, if not the most competitive competitor in the EV space in 2022. Once you actually drive this car, the first thing you'll notice is simply how roomy it is inside. Just look in here. There's tons of space, the seats, there's this high-end trim in here. They're very comfy in this bottle plastic leather, and when you're driving, everything on the road just feels tight and sharp. There's a lot to love from the driving experience, both in the cockpit and how it feels. From the outside, the car does look quite low, and I do wish it looked a bit taller, kind of more in that crossover space. But once you're inside, it feels plenty tall enough, and it feels much taller than being in my car. The car also has a decent punch off the line with a 0 to 100 time of just over 5 seconds, which feels pretty wild in a car and as suburban mom-like as this one. This is of course though for the all-wheel drive trim, which I'm in, that sits at the top of the range. Standard Ioniq 5s will sit somewhere between 7 to 8.5 seconds for their 100-kilometer time, depending on which motor configuration you have. But yeah, in this version, the high-end all-wheel drive one, even on it's really stormy here today, I should mention that, but even on the highway with crazy winds and rain and lots of other traffic, this car handled itself really admirably. I was a big fan of just how headstrong it was, and we had no problems. The brakes also feel nice, but the other thing I think worth mentioning is the paddle shifters behind the steering wheel. These don't shift gears like they would in a traditional car, but rather change the strength of the regenerative braking characteristics, with the most intense level taking the car down to a one-pedal driving mode that stops the car fairly quickly as soon as you lift your foot off the accelerator. However, if you're not a fan of this, there are other modes that still get you a bit of regen to save a bit of range as you're driving, although you get to use the brake with that one, so it's more of a regular driving experience. So I guess summing up my driving experience, it's been pretty peaceful. I mean, the world has been storming around us, and driving in here has been really nice for this day. So I'm gonna leave you with that fact that I think it's very peaceful in here. All right, let's talk about the actual interior of the car and some of the more specs of it. So it feels super nice, and it's a wide variety of materials. I mentioned the bottle plastic leather on the seats already, but there's also Tyvek on the doors, which is this tiny thin material they put on homes to seal them before they put actual siding on. I'll throw up an image and you'll be able to see what it is, and you'll be like, oh, what? But they used it tastefully here, and it also has some little squares on it, sort of part of the design of the headlights and the taillights. It's pretty cohesive and a cool material to use inside of a car. Part of the reason the car has so much interior space, the big reason that makes me talk about how roomy and comfortable and peaceful it is in here, I think, is because the floor is so flat because of the battery. So this allows you to move the armrest back and forth, so it can even be used by the people in the back a little bit, and you could honestly lay someone down on the front seat here just along the ground. It's so flat. It's very interesting, and it just makes the car feel more roomy when your feet aren't trapped as much. I don't know how else to describe it. Moving over to the infotainment space though, there is an array of classic buttons and dials and climate controls. So a lot of people coming from traditional cars should have no problem figuring out how to at least run the basics here. But even moving over to the touchscreen, it's also laid out in sort of like an app way. It seems designed similarly to how you would design a tablet or a phone, so it didn't take long to figure out how to work it. I think the infotainment options here will be a really decent option for a lot of regular people. There's even this really pleasing home screen that showed your nav, range, some other car info like the weather, and it looked kind of like this Zen Mode OnePlus thing. It was really cool. However, I'm not sure how useful it would be for someone like me that mostly uses Android Auto or CarPlay, since I don't use in-car nav or many of the in-car infotainments, but if you do, this is a bit of a step above the rest for sure. I guess the only thing negative-wise that I might say about the interior is the bezels around the screen are quite large. It would have been nice just to see Hyundai put a bit of a larger screen in there just to slim those down a little bit. I think that would help modernize it, but overall, there's not really a complaint there. It's just maybe a little. Okay, so I've only had the car for a few hours, so let's just go over some other fun facts to cap things off, and let's see what's quirky about this car. I will say let's start off with what's not quirky. So when I looked at videos before I came here to try and learn about the car, I'd seen the European and Korean models, the glove box is actually like a glove drawer. Super cool. Very disappointed that that's not in the Canadian or North American models, and I would love to see Hyundai bring that over in the future. It seems like a really cool design, and I think people would get a lot out of that quirk. On the plus side, there are a few driving modes, including a snow mode for Canadians. There are retro video game styled headlights and taillights with this cool blocky design that I mentioned earlier being on the Tyvek on the doors. It's also noticeable in sort of the speaker grill up there, and you can see it on the seats over here. It's quite interesting and kind of got this cool cyberpunk effect to it that I'm a big fan of. So another cool thing though is you can also use the fob to pull the car in and out of a parking spot. You can use these buttons to pull it straight forward or straight back as long as you're standing beside it. There's also an AI adaptive cruise control thing that's going on in here. I haven't been able to test it yet, but essentially it will learn how you drive and how far you generally stay away from the cars in front of you. And then when it uses cruise control or adaptive cruise control, it will try to maintain a similar distance, which I think is a really smart thing, because any way that can make the self-driving of the car feel more like the driver's driving, I think will go a long way to help people trust the software more. Back to the seats, I forgot to mention, when you recline the front seat, there's a little footrest thing that pops up to just kind of keep your legs propped open. So if you do have to sit somewhere for like 20 minutes to charge, this is a very comfortable car to be doing it in. Another cool feature with the driving is that there is an there's a heads-up display that sort of floats in the windshield showing you if your lane guidance is on, some directions, and your speed. But you can also set an AR effect to that, so it will sort of try to apply your directions, showing you where to turn on the turn, or it will apply a little highlighted blue line underneath the car in front of you to show you that the radars are actually picking up that car. Again, interesting. I haven't been able to test it out as much as I want, but a cool concept, something I'm looking forward to seeing a little more of. So 5 USB-A ports in here, 1 wireless charger. My phone got a little hot on it, but not bad. It had to be plugged into the front USB-A port to use CarPlay or Android Auto. I would have loved to see a USB-C port in here, but there is of course the 12 volts. You could put your own adapter in there if you want. Still, as a car that's so futuristic as this, it's weird that it doesn't have a USB-C port. Anyway, not a big deal. People can buy cables. What is a slightly bigger deal of a cable to buy is the $300 add-on to go into the plug so that you can plug in regular 110 volt plugs. Basically the traditional plugs that are in your house can be part of this car. So if you have the optimum top of the line trim, there is one charger under here. You can plug in your MacBook, a toaster, a hair straightener, whatever. Plug it in under there, but that's only on the highest end trim. So I guess it's useful if you do a lot of camping. But to me, one of the biggest pluses of owning an EV is being able to do these cool battery things and charge things and having plugs and having access to electricity and technology that you couldn't previously have access to. Hyundai gating this behind a $300 extra purchase just seems a little weird to me. Why isn't there a 12 volt up front? I don't know. Not a 12 volt. There is a 12 volt up front. Why is there not a 110 home plug up front? Give me those plugs, get them up front. The passenger is the person that's going to be using it the most in my experience, so I want that up here. And that's basically all I can think of for this EV. That's the end of my rambling. So, I think that this is an EV a lot of people can not only afford, but will want to buy. It's got a cool design, long range, fast charge technology, and a cabin cockpit situation that doesn't feel like a spaceship or some sort of futuristic thing. It just feels like a nice room, a comfy space to be while you drive or charge. I think Hyundai really hit the nail on the head with the Ioniq 5, and for a lot of people, it's one of the coolest looking EVs from the outside. But for me, I think what's really sold me, and I know I've said it a lot, is the comfort of the interior. The sheer amount of space feels freeing as both a driver and when I was the passenger when someone else was driving. So Hyundai is calling it its digital living room concept, and to me, this came across in a way that I liked a lot. Comfy seats and extra leg room and headroom are something I will never complain about in a car, especially one you may need to sit in a lot while you're charging. And you also have to sit in these things when you drive them too, which is tough, but you do. And the comfier the seats, the better. Basically, that's it. I'm Brad Bennett. If you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out online at @TheBradFad, and make sure to follow MobileSyrup too for all kinds of other tech news. I'll see you guys next time. Peace. That was a weird piece. Cool piece.